Let's get on to the debutants in this year's World Matchplay. We've got 4 of them, and fair to say they've all been handed brutal draws. You've got Mads Rasmussen going against Peter Wright. You've got Martin Schindler going against Gerwyn Price. Martin Lukeman going against James Wade. And the last player to get in the field, Roby John Rodriguez, going against Johnny Clayton. But who are those 4 players, the debutants, has the best chance of causing an upset?
I think all of them could, because there are question marks. Yeah, and I will acknowledge first, I agree. Those are obviously really difficult draws. You have the top 2 players in the world, and you have the guy who topped the Premier League table this year, and you have another player who made the Premier League playoffs. So how much more difficult can that get? Very difficult, at least on paper, to pick harder draws than that. But all 4 of those players right now have question marks. Peter Wright's definitely coming back into form, and in the last couple of weeks, for the first time since becoming world number 1, has really looked the part. He has regressed significantly for the first few months after becoming number 1, but he's steadied himself at the summit and looks now like a player who could go and defend the title. But there's been flaws in his game recently, and it seems like he's been in his own head at times. It's a draw that you wouldn't want if you were picking out a player from these 16, but it's not one that is as difficult as it could be for getting the world number 1. As far as the world number 2, Gezi has a lot of questions right now, and Martin Schindler's playing really, really good stuff. He seems the player who's going to get a title this year. I'm a little surprised he still hasn't, but he's gotten close a few times. That's a challenging draw, but if you ever want to jar Gerwyn Price, it's right now, because he's not been at the top of his game this year. He's been battling some injuries, and the pressure is going to be on him, not on Martin Schindler. James Wade, we don't know which Wade we're going to get. There's been moments where James Wade is scoring better than ever, and he's finishing at least on par with ever. But there's times where he just doesn't look up for it. That said, as I said in the last question, Martin Lukeman has regressed a little bit over the last month or so, but still Wade, it depends which Wade shows up. And finally, Johnny Clayton he hasn't won a title yet this year, and since the Premier League has been facing a lot of early exits. He had a very, very good showing on the last day of the Pro Tour events to make the final, and he was the best player on the day. He wasn't the best player in the final. Brendan Dolan was, but he was the best player up until then, and that's why he got through to the final. But that's the first time we've seen Johnny Clayton look like the Johnny Clayton who was a world beater last year in some time. He's a player that has some question marks over the current state of his game. I think all 4 of these are tough draws, but at the same time, I think all 4 of them have a chance of causing the upset because of the question marks that are in all 4 of those seeds games. That said, if I'm going to have to pick one, and since the question says I have to pick one, I guess I will. I'm going to go Martin Schindler. I think Martin Schindler, beyond being the highest qualifier of these, is playing the best, probably playing the second or third best of any of the Pro Tour qualifiers right now. And just the questions in Gezi's game and the fact that he's not had much success here make him the prime target to pick an upset. But if all 4 do it, I wouldn't be all that surprised. And if all 4 seeds win, I wouldn't be all that surprised either.
I think that's a fair shout, and I'll work my way from the top to the bottom of the draw, going through the debutants. And right at the top of the draw, we do have Mads Rasmussen going against the top seed Peter Wright, and he was one of the players that last week, when we spoke about which players needed to have a good run in Barnsley, the last lot of Pro Tours heading into the World Matchplay, Peter Wright was one of the players I mentioned. And okay, he didn't come away with a title from those 4 days, but I think he'll be pleased with a lot of the performances that he put in across those 4 days. He had 800 plus averages, which was the most of anyone across the 4 days. He had 495 plus averages, but he kicked off each day with a ton plus average. And it's worth as well, okay, it's 12 months ago now, but it's worth just digging out those stats from last year at the Winter Gardens, last year's World Matchplay. This is from Sport Radar. Peter Wright had 104.91 tournament average, the 5th highest we've ever had in the World Matchplay. The semi-final against Michael van Gerwen, 110.37. That's the highest in a World Matchplay semi-final, 7th highest overall in any game on that stage. And okay, 5 days, that's a long time in darts between that Monday last Players' Championship, the opening night in Blackpool, when he's going to play his first game. But I think Peter Wright will come through that tie. And you've got to give credit to Mads Rasmussen as well, because okay, he wasn't at his best the last lot of Pro Tours, but he was probably thinking about this race to the match play, wasn't he? Because he is someone that's been close to getting into this tournament a few times now. And okay, he didn't perform at his best in those last few events, but he did enough, and he deserves the spot in the field, making history for Latvia. And I do expect him to push Peter Wright in that game. Going beyond that, Johnny Clayton, Roby John Rodriguez, again, Roby John Rodriguez, the last 2 weekends, that Euro Tour final, then this past weekend, getting into the spots, getting that last spot. And okay, we didn't see all his games. A lot of them weren't streamed, but he did look very focused on the task at hand. He picked up prize money each day, and even on the last day, kept the pressure on Ross Smith and the chasing pack, winning 2 games before going out to Peter Wright. But he's a player that's playing with a lot of confidence at the moment. And Johnny Clayton, yeah, I think he needed that run as well, getting to the final. He'll be happy with the response he's had. But I do get the feeling with these games as well, a lot of these players, they wouldn't have had a lot of experience of playing those session matches in leg play where you're playing 5 legs, you're going off, you're coming back on to play 5 legs, you're going off, and then you're playing to a conclusion. I think that's something that for a lot of these players, the debutants, they wouldn't have had a lot of experience. Okay, they've played World Championships before, apart from Martin Lukeman. But from a leg play perspective, if you drop a first session 4-1, 5-0, that's a lot different than losing the first set. So I think the first session is going to be important in all these games for the debutants. And for me, Martin Lukeman, yeah, I think he's got a shot against James Wade. He's not had the best of times in the match play over the last few years. Gerwyn Price, you touched on him as well. It's not been the best of years for him so far, and we didn't see him play the last couple of days. So for me, yeah, I think that's a fair shout going with Martin Schindler. Beyond that, I'm probably looking at Martin Lukeman. I know he's not in the best of form at the moment, but I think he's someone that we've seen when he gets on a roll on stage, he can produce some good darts. So for me, I'll go with you. I'll go with Martin Schindler. But if I was to pick a second one, I'll go with Martin Lukeman.